Thank you.
Okay. I am delighted to be here tonight. I serve as a resource for you for voter registration information, election information, and I've brought some slides. We're going to go through some topics. I know you've got lots of questions, and I promise I'll give you a chance to ask every question you've got. But I want to cover some things. Chuck and I have talked off and on about various things in the election process. I recognize faces of election clerks and judges in here, so I don't feel so alone. I know some faces, and I see my commissioner here. So, I can settle down. Now, when you look at this slide, try something new. Now, how many of you have already served in a polling place? Okay. And maybe you're looking forward to doing something different. Now, when I say try something new, there's all kinds of avenues for service. And when you look at these cookies, they look like what? Chocolate chip cookies. But the ingredients are chickpeas, fresh peanut butter, honey, and chocolate chips. So I'm going to encourage you tonight to be thinking of ways that, it might look like the same old roll, but it's going to be something a little different. When you look at just the process for qualification for being a registered voter, that's going to start the whole process. If you're going to make a difference in the electoral field, you've got to be registered to vote. And then also, let's talk about election workers and then poll watchers, poll workers. And then when you look at this picture, a couple of you have already seen this picture in a presentation before, but I always talk about, forever you've had to show identification when you go to the polling place. And we're under the rule now, you must show photo ID. And forever I've been saying, even your mama's got to show ID. So when you show up at the poll and your mama comes and checks in, mama's got to show ID. So I want you to see my mama. Now my mama is the far right side, beautiful white-haired woman. And I can say that everyone in the foreground is registered to vote. Now when you look at being a registered voter in Texas, you have to be registered 30 days before an election to be eligible to vote in an election. To be an election worker, it's similar to that. You have to be a qualified voter in the jurisdiction in the election that's going on in order to serve as an election worker. But one thing we do also is a list process for getting judges appointed to serve. And last week in Commissioner's Court, the Commissioner's Court blessed the next series, the 2-year series of Republican and Democratic judges and alternate judges that we will initially draw from for November elections and for any other elections that are called by either the county judge or the governor. And the May City school elections, the jurisdictions typically give us guidance on who to select, but over time, we tend to use the same group of people because they're trained and they're ready to serve again. And then to be a poll watcher, kind of the same, some of the same qualifications. You have to be a registered voter in the jurisdiction and be appointed to serve in a polling place. And a poll watcher is appointed either by a political party, a specific purpose committee treasurer, or a specific candidate. And then you can go and serve in the polling place. Now you can serve in the polling place early voting, election day, and even in my office on election night when we're doing tabulation, you can come to Central Count, to the receiving station, and watch the tabulation process. When you look at voting systems, we were on the punch card system until 2003. We were in that 2000 presidential election on that bad punch card. It's not a bad punch card. Punch card was a good system, but there were things that voters had to be careful of. And when the press came to me after that election and said, what about that bad punch card? I said, well, let's look at all the things we warn voters about. We have a stop sign on the back of that punch card ballot that says stop, you're putting it in the wrong way if they insert it backwards to get those dimples or those little bumps that would cause a pregnant Chad that you've heard in the news. And then these various posters that were in the polling place. So you look at that situation and you look at some need for some voter responsibility for looking at their ballot and making sure everything's in place. Well, we moved forward and went through a process, a committee process of choosing an electronic voting system. The company that was selected, when we purchased it, it was Diebold. Before that, it was Global. Then Premier became the name. And Dominion has acquired the intellectual property, so they are actually providing the service to our equipment. So, long story short, we have premier election voting system. R6, R7s, which means a TS, a touchscreen, or a touchscreen X. Those are electronic machines, and before each election, we go through various processes on those machines. So let me talk a little about that. But so we take the bull by the horn, and this young man is our oldest grandson, and he can register to vote in 2020. And when you go through each election process, you have the coding of the election, but what's very important is the logic and accuracy testing and the inspection and sealing of the voting machines. Now, the logic and accuracy testing has to be done on each of the machines, on the tabulation equipment, and it has to be performed once before it's ever used. So before we even put the machines out in the polling place, we've gone through diagnostic testing that shows we have expected results that when we feed the paper ballots and we run the electronic ballots, we know what the answer is. So we have to feed these through a ballot for every ballot style, every precinct, and then we've got to have accounting for over and under votes, and we go through this every election. We have it, it's published in the paper, it is on the Commissioner's bulletin board, on our bulletin board, and it's also sent to the party chairs on when this event is going to occur or start. And we want people to come and watch it. And very often, we have nobody taking us up on it. What we're doing is going through each machine, and we're doing diagnostic checks. We're making sure that everything is clean, that it's working properly, date time is set, the calibration is set. We're looking at various things on the batteries, and we're running that test itself before we set it for election. And the inspection and sealing is that thing that's done on each machine prior to every single election. And that's included. We do those things together, and it's called the public test. And so when you see a newspaper publication about the public test, check it out. Come in and watch what we're doing. And it can happen anywhere, typically it's about 8 weeks before election day. Now, when we know we're waiting to see if there are vacancies in a race, and we have some stair-step and domino effects on people changing candidate races, that can delay some of the coding. So we do send it to the party chairs, and if you're wanting to know when this is going to occur, email me, and I'll let you know when it's been published and when we start this event. And this grandson can register to vote in 2025. Voter file maintenance. This is something that is dear to Chuck's heart. He likes to look at data. There's just so many interesting things about the voter file itself. When I first joined Collin County, we had about 123 registered voters, and we're over 478,000 registered voters now. And when you think, people say, well, what are you doing? There's not an election. It's like, we're so busy every day. I've had a long day. How about you guys? I'm glad to be here to tell you about some of this stuff. But there's daily voter file maintenance. And what that means, we have new people that are wanting to register to vote. We have people that are changing their addresses. People that have moved from one county to another county. People that have, they've moved out of our county and want to get canceled off of our rolls. We've had people that have died, and we have to remove them from the rolls. So there's a constant influx of voter information coming in, voter information going out. And there's a daily import and export of voter files to the Secretary of State's statewide database, which is called TEAM. And there's always that information going back and forth. We have files that are sent, when we send voter registration information, let's say you brought in a stack of volunteer deputy registrar applications, you've registered some voters at an event. When we enter that information, you don't tell the voter or the applicant, oh, you'll be registered in just a couple of days. You're letting them know that the process has begun, because now we've got to validate the information they provided. Sometimes they give us birthdays that have numbers transposed. So it takes a couple of days more for the state to say, well, we can't find them with this birth date, What's up with that? And so we're looking to see, is there information that's been transposed? We're looking at information where, they say driver's licenses are not reused. I don't know how that happens, but we find voters that have the same driver's license. We get that resolved. We have information. But now what's happening across the state with the beginning of the statewide database team, you have on your voter registration, upper left-hand side, your VUID number, your voter unique identifier number. That number is a 10-digit number. It is unique to you in the state of Texas. So when you move from Collin to another county in Texas, that number now travels with you. Now we also have tracked over time, historical data, what we call a county legacy number. So for those of you that get the voter roll and massage data and look at data, you know about those two numbers that are assigned to voters. But they really don't have two. It's a unique one for the county and a unique one for the state. When you look at voter file maintenance, sometimes it can be real scary, but it's not. It's just a daily process, and you just have to look it square in the face, just like my granddaughter, and you move on and do the steps every day. And Ms. Taylor can register to vote in 2026. We've got vote centers. How many of you have voted at a vote center? Okay, that either tells me you're not a Collin County voter or you haven't voted since 2009. Or maybe you voted in May City School. But what's exciting this year, this is the first year that we have done May City School, primaries, primary runoffs, and we'll go into November all as a vote center year. Now there's been things along the way. We've learned a lot, we've had some growing pains, but overwhelmingly, this is the best idea for convenience to voters. Why not have election day voting act like early voting? Go anywhere you want based on convenience. We have the equipment, the technology, and the ability to pull up every voter's ballot at every location. And when you look at the selection process for locations, the first year we had a committee that helped to designate the locations, but locations are always blessed by Commissioner's Court. When you look at updates and changes, we have locations in November that have been historical locations for many years, and then something happens. The location's no longer available, something happens, there's damage to the building, there's reasons we need to change, or we find we're growing and we just need to add more locations. We're always on the hunt for more information. Now, I've lived in several cities in Collin County. I've been very blessed in that. I know this place pretty well. But I'm still driving around with my jaw hitting the floor going, where did that come from? So I'm going to rely on you guys to tell me, hey, if you know of a really good election day vote center prospect, let me know. We're looking for new ones all the time. Ideally, they would not charge us to be there. They have lots of parking. They're on the first floor. They have space for maybe 20 machines if we're adding new ones now, 10 machines at least, but and then technology requirements. So keep us posted if you know of things that you're seeing in your area. We're approaching Baylor Hospital now in Richardson. Not having any luck, so if anybody has any contacts or ends with them, holler, help us. When you look at the judge selection process, because we're not using precinct-based, it makes it a little different because what we just did is we appointed judges out of precinct-based selection. But what that allows us to do is to move people around. We have stronger judges that work certain areas. We have people that are willing to travel all over the county. So we really have the best of all worlds in the selection process for judges. And when you look at wanting to serve as an election official, it starts in that prospect with your political party. They appoint the judges and the alternate judges, and for us to use as the first group. And then typically the judge at an appointed polling place or vote center then selects the clerks. And based on the election, they're pulling clerks from both political parties or from jurisdictions, for cities and schools. Training is available. We're not ever going to send you out there cold, but we're also looking at new ways to revamp our training. We would like to get some more things online. We have lots of training opportunities, but we've got training for the use of the voting machine, how to get that ready for voters, the use of the laptop, getting all those peripherals plugged in, how to create the voter access card for the voter, and then also the election law procedures. So you've got quite a bit of hours in training if you're the judge, and then you're responsible then for helping your clerks to establish what their roles are in each polling place. Election night reporting. Now, one thing that's different when you've got a vote center. Election night reporting, man, we want to cut to the chase. Who are the winners? We want to know this quick. So at 7 o'clock on election night, early votes are released, and off we go. We're waiting, the polls have just closed. We're waiting for judges to get to the elections office so we can upload the tabulation information. With a vote center, because you can vote at any location, what that means is no race is complete. No race until every single vote center has reported. So on the top of our reports, we add a line that shows the number reporting of the total number. So if there's 67 vote centers, it's final when it says 67 of 67 vote centers reporting. We've been working with the press on that. Candidates know that, so they know what happens if you've got one voter from each precinct that has voted, let's just say at 4 locations in the county. Once every single precinct has tripped that counter group, it's going to automatically say, well, we're 100%. Well, you're at 100% for the counter group, but you still got other precinct opportunities to come in for every precinct. So it's just a little bit of an education timing for people that are running for office, how to read those reports. We begin posting out election day and early voting combined at 8:30. We're giving people a chance to close up, travel, and get to us, and us a chance to get them uploaded. And I got that 8:30 timeline from my good friend Bruce Sherbert in Dallas County. And then we report every 30 to 45 minutes after that until we're complete for the evening. Equipment. It's not just voting equipment out there. You've got laptops, you've got printers, you've got scan guns, you've got magnetic swipes for the driver's license, and all these things have to be plugged in and working and in a space where it's kind of orderly and people can step up and process for voting. So if you've been at a polling place, you see all these things going on, and your judges have worked very hard to get that information pulled together to make it streamlined for you in that polling place. Now, Ms. Haley can register to vote in 2028. Early voting ballot board. This is maybe another place where, if you haven't served before, this might be something you would think of. There is a selection process. The political party chairs will submit the names of prospects for either the judge or the alternate judge of the ballot board. And at this time, your process is determined by who won the last governor's race. So the Republican Party won the last governor's race. So in Collin County, the judge of our ballot board is a Republican, and the alternate judge would then be a Democratic worker. The selection process then is I will evaluate how many machines are in process, how many ballots and mail ballots are in motion, and I will let the parties know an approximate number of workers that we need. And they will each submit equal numbers to serve on that ballot board. And what the ballot board does, they will pre-process the mail ballots. When we start mailing ballots, we mail ballots, the ballots come back. They're checked in, and they're married up with a jacket envelope at this time. And what that means, they come back in a carrier envelope that has the voter's signature on the outside of the envelope. And these get stacked into a cabinet that's locked, and then the ballot board will go through them through a list. And what they're double checking on our work is on the application process, is there a reason checked? And they are checking that, and they're also checking to see, is there a signature on the carrier envelope? And if those things are in place, then the ballot can be moved forward for opening that carrier and processing the mail ballot. Now, typically it's a very smooth, streamlined operation. But what gets kind of crazy, this year something happened. We have the ability for those that are 65 and older, or those who have a disability, that if they are doing a regular mail application, we have two varieties. regular mail, it can be an informal letter, it can be the card that comes from the state, versus a federal postcard application, which is a federal application. Now, the regular mail application, typically before this year, was good for one election or one election plus a runoff. Now for those categories, 65 and older, and those with a disability, they can become an annual absentee request. Now, here's what happened this year. We had the primary election. There were candidates that were mailing out applications for ballot by mail, and they were pre-filled, which is fine. And they checked that box, annual application for a ballot by mail. So there goes the primary ballot. May 10th for cities and schools, they don't remember asking for it, they didn't, but they have this annual thing in process. So we send out the mail ballot for the city school. But they're in line also for that runoff ballot, which is also in May. So we have ballots going like this. And what the ballot board is watching for, first of all, when the voter gets a ballot, you're hoping that they will address the ballot that came in that envelope and put it back in that envelope and mail it back in, because it has an identifier for the election. And we did have a small number that they had a May 10th city school and a May 27th primary runoff ballot at the same time. And they put the ballots in the wrong envelopes. There are about 14 of these. And so the state had to come out and tell us, how do we deal with this? What do we do? There were some situations where we could mail back to the voter and say, whoops, you got to start this over. There were some that we couldn't process because there was no identification once the ballot board got so far in opening the ballots. So there's always these rules in motion, new things that happen that you have to say, how are we going to tighten this up and make it better? And then provisional ballots. You hear about provisional ballots. If the voter's not on the roll for various reasons, they're able to vote a provisional ballot. And in Collin County, as I teach my classes, I want my judges to offer a provisional ballot. Don't send them away. Just, the only thing I can offer today is a provisional ballot, and it may or may not be counted. That'll be determined after the election, and you'll receive notice of whether it was counted or not, and if it was not counted, the reason why it wasn't counted. So here's what happens. Judge, you process those provisional ballots. They come back to my office. The ballot board opens the green bags. They've been sealed, and they come and give those to my voter registration staff. They go through the voter registration research. It might be we're looking at the DPS portal to see, did they ever try to register to vote with you? We're looking at various things, information to see, did we miss them? Is there other information? Sometimes it's cancel my ballot by mail because I want to vote in person. So we track that down. And then we provide that provisional ballot information. We've detailed our answers on the back. We give it back to the ballot board. The ballot board is the authority to look at the information on that provisional affidavit. What did the judge say? What did my staff say? And there's certain things that if these things are checked, then they shall accept it for voting, and other things, they don't count them. So they're the final authority on that. And then, what happens to those early voting machines? Election day, the judge closes and ends the election and brings those memory cards to me, and we upload and tabulate. But early voting, every day you're opening and closing polls. You start every day. You have an audit log that you're recording the number of votes that have been cast on each machine, the seals that have been put on the machines. You're auditing against everything you put on the night before or what was there when we sent it out. You're auditing and confirming that it's still in place the next day when you keep going forward. And so at the end of the election, the machines are brought back to my office and they are closed. When I say closed, the election is ended by the ballot board on election day. The reason for that, we can't have totals printed before election day. If we end the election on that electronic equipment, it automatically starts those tapes printing. So the judges in the field in early voting cannot do that process. We wait till election day for the ballot board to begin that process. They're going through the audit of all the paperwork that the judges have completed, and then they are ending the election, removing memory cards and placing them in locked containers. We've got a security guard that sits there to just observe the process, and then they go into tabulation and we upload them, the cards for reports for later that evening. And Mr. Saxon can register to vote in 2028 as well. Okay, how can you help? There's lots of ways you can help. When I say language skills, I'm not just speaking about bilingual languages. Spanish is something we're certainly looking for. I'm also specifically looking for American Sign Language. And so if you've got those skills, I'm looking for you. It's a high-paying job when you get ASL interpreters that have gone through a lot of schooling, but it's very important that we provide that service. We don't provide it at every location. I have one location. We had a disability group that came in and did a survey of where was the best place to place this interpreter, and they had selected Spring Creek campus of our community college in Plano. You can become a volunteer deputy registrar. That means that you can go and register people to vote face-to-face. Now, you go through a training program with us. We give you supplies. And the difference, we've got white applications that are placed in the mail. Anybody can take some of those, and you provide them to your neighbors, your friends, and your family moving in, and get people registered to vote. But if they are to be mailed, they have to come back to me in the mail. And they're no longer just generalized, voter registration applications. They are county specific. They have that smart barcode on them. So if you're doing an event and you're overlapping into Dallas, into Tarrant, into Denton counties, you can't use Collin County applications for those other counties. You can certainly, if you use them, you're going to have to scratch out. You don't want to go there. But let's talk about deputy registrars. We're going to give you, it's a green application. There are receipts on this application. And the training you've gone through allows you to stand face-to-face with the applicant and process them for their application for voter registration. And the training you'll go through, you're the first set of eyes. You're not telling them, oh, you will become a registered voter. You're telling them the process has begun. But you're the first set of eyes. You're going to look to see did they check yes for citizenship. If they check no, you're going to stop the process and let them know they have to be a U.S. citizen in order to register to vote. You're going to evaluate their name, their address for this reason. Can you read it? If you can't read it, I can't read it. And we've gone around the office sometimes, is this a 7? Is this a 9? Is this an S? Is this a Z? We don't want to butcher people's names, but if it's not clear for us, help us with our eyes, just confirm with the voter, the applicant there, what is this information? They're going to complete it in its entirety, and they'll sign it and date it, and then there's a receipt that the deputy registrar signs and puts their information on, and they have a Collin County ID number, and they give one receipt to the applicant, and then you maintain the other receipt. Now, you're going to bring those voter registration applications into my office within 5 days. And that's not weekdays, that is 5 days. So there's an obligation that you're committing to time, that you have a time period to fulfill that. But it's certainly something that can help get more people registered to vote. You can be a vote center clerk. Sometimes we get phone calls, people say, well, I'm new to the area, I've worked before, I'd like to get involved again. We're going to take their name and number, but we're also going to send them to their political party, because there might be other things they can do at the political party level and get to be known, because, again, our judges are the ones appointing the clerks. And only when the judge calls and says, I'm out of clerks, I need some help, do we start sending in people that are new to us that way. We're going to train them, but we want them to get affiliated through their political parties. And then student election workers. How many of you have knowledge of student election workers? This is going on. We can have student election workers work in the polling place. They have to fill out a document. Their principal has to approve it, or if they're homeschooled, their home principal. And we've had several students throughout several elections that do, work in the polls for us, and they're great for their technical skills on laptop and their language skills. So if you know someone, start beating those bushes to see, hey, how can we get some more help in that regard. And it might not be something necessarily that you're doing, that you're fulfilling the role, but you're finding someone who can help.
What's the minimum age on that, Sharon?
It's 16.
16.
Yeah. So what I'm encouraging you to do is roll up your sleeves, get involved in the process, and know that there are things you can come and observe. We welcome that. We want you to be involved in the process and see what we're doing. And then just, let us know how we can answer questions. And glad to be here. And this little guy who can register to vote in 2030, and he's a mess. Yes, sir.
It's kind of a question of curiosity. Say, you're at the poll and you're working, and a person comes up to you, can't produce evidence that they're a U.S. citizen. What do you do?
If they come into the polling place, and are they in your role or not, you can't find them.
I don't know. Let's assume they're not on your roll.
Okay.
But they have some registration card or whatever. But the reason I ask is I deal in a business where I have different names on different forms of paperwork, and
Sure.
it's difficult to prove who is who. How do you handle that situation?
Sure. If the voter, the person approaching you is not on the roll, first thing is you're going to contact our office and communicate with us to see, first of all, did we omit them from the roll? Is there something, a variation, their name misspelled? But if they're not in the roll, then the only way to vote them is a provisional affidavit. And they're going to still have to provide photo ID at this time. They're going to have to fill out the affidavit itself and process for voting. As far as us checking on citizenship in the polling place, the forms of photo ID, all of them are not a requirement for citizenship. So when you complete that voter registration affidavit, it's an affidavit. You're checking a box, yes, I am a U.S. citizen. So we're looking for that paperwork on voters. And if this person processes a provisional affidavit voter, if they check that yes, they're a U.S. citizen, and we don't find them, what we're going to do is register them to vote and get that process started. If they check no, then we're going to send a letter that says, you're not eligible for voter registration.
Well,
Don't go away. More to come.
Okay.
All right. So we have some questions that we've prepared that she's aware of. We have a few things that she isn't aware of, and then we have your questions. And we're a bit short on time, so I want to try to condense everything as much as I can and make progress. This thing you cannot read, it's on the screen. But if you were to walk to the screen and look at it carefully, you probably could. And what it is, it's a formatted content of the voter file that you can have, you can get, you can purchase, that you can work with. The problem with this goofy thing is if you will think of your computer and this little slide thing over at the bottom, and you'll reach up here and grab it and slide it over here, you'll see that there's still data. That is to say, there's a lot of stuff on that file, and I'm not really sure how many of you can work very successfully with the file. It is rather large. Not as big as Dallas, but it's pretty large. And it gets changed every day. It's referred to as a voter file, and you can buy it for $27.03,
I think.
1, 2, or 3, and it must be cash.
Or check.
But people have asked to see why that is, and asked why why don't I get it, and why don't I use it? Well, if I get it to you to use, I'm not sure you could do anything with it. But I can tell you quite frankly that if there's anything you want done with it, simply ask, and I will see that it gets done.
One thing he's working with, there are up to, 20 elections on their election dates, and there's election data, voter history, so you've got all of the registered voters in the 40. I don't know how this works. And then voter history for 40 elections. Now, when it goes back, everyone may not have voted in all 40, so that's why you're going to see a lot of blank spots. And then you've got areas where it's designated that they vote election day, early voting, or by mail. And then political party affiliation with the parties.
That's right. So we do have that. Collin County, the Collin County GOP has it. We can work it to answer any of your questions regarding the voter file. That information is available to you, and we ask that you come to it. to us and ask us, we'll provide that for you. Now let's move on to some other stuff. So we've talked about election worker qualifications. The one thing I see that when the election workers are in training, that sometimes 7 of them will ask the exact same question. Does that seem to make any difference in their qualification?
No.
You do remember seeing that in your training session?
Yes.
Typically, they're our age, right?
So have mercy.
But there are those that are your age or your age. There are the younger people that are out there. So when you people that work in the elections for Sharon, when you get a clerk, please consider getting a young clerk and train them so they'll be the very best judge in the future. That's your job as an election clerk. Poll watcher qualifications, you talked about that, how voter centers are chosen. We talked a bit about that. Let's talk about the voting machines. T-Bolt made those, is that right? Who wrote the software for that? It's not open source, is it? When there, my friend, is the problem. So we want to know if you can tell whether or not our votes were counted.
Okay. When you look at the discussion of open source code, what we have to rely on is the products that are used for voting purposes have to be federally certified and then also state certified before they can be used. So they go through some stringent testing at the federal level and the state level. So when you look at the versions of software that are approved and tested at the state level for us, those are the versions, we can show the versions that we have applied to our voting, our gym system, and that we're running approved versions of software. And then we go through each election, that logic and accuracy testing, the public test, and the testing before it's ever used, because if it does not accurately add up to what we're expecting, I can't use the program in that election. I have to start over.
And we can observe that tabulation process.
Yes.
And we do that by contacting you, your office.
Well, to observe the process, that's still going to be through a poll watcher appointment process. Now, for example, the political party chairs during a party election, they will be present in the tabulation room if they choose. City and school officials, they can be present just by nature, it's their election. But for candidates are typically not present. They send a poll watcher in to observe the process, and they report back to the candidates themselves.
So we've heard earlier this evening, Sharon, that possibly somebody that wasn't alive voted in Dallas. We've heard also that a state, Pennsylvania, had several places, counties that had absolutely no votes for a candidate. And after that was made public, the people that did vote for that candidate complained to their commissioner's court, where's my vote? How can we feel confident that those scenarios do not apply in Collin County?
Sure. What's of utmost importance is when you're voting in the voting booth, as a voter, you are selecting your choices, and then you get to the summary screen. It's critical that you evaluate that summary screen. Now, if it's a long ballot, you can't see everything on the summary screen. You have to use the scroll bar on the left to see the bottom of the ballot itself. Look to see, verify that your choices have been selected prior to casting your ballot. If it's not, if you find one you've missed, or you find one you want to change, or you find one that's like, I didn't think I touched that, go back and make your selection. Make it the way you want it before you press cast ballot. Prior to casting the ballot, you can ask that judge to come over and help you out. I have a question, something's not right. Ask your questions then, they can cancel and start over. But again, the process is look at your review screen. If your selections are in place, that's what's cast and tabulated for your ballot. And we've also, years ago, we went through the manual count that's required after an election. The state selects 3 precincts after the election in the races. And we went through that for many years. And we would have to go in and physically go to each machine on the gem server and print the ballot faces from those races and go through and hand count them. And every one that we did, we had an exact match on, of course, what was tabulated. And then with the tabulation process now electronically, we are exempt from having to do the manual count, just as a process. Where are we headed?
Yeah, okay, so on to the electric vote counting. I have a right to cast a vote, but I also have a right to know that my vote is being counted properly, the way I cast it. So these electronic machines are taking our votes, and they're also tabulating them. The source code is proprietary information, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so yes, I know that it's gone through a federal process and it's gone through a state process. You might be secure with that, but I'm not. How do I watch my vote being counted to know that my vote is counted the way I cast it?
As far as what you're doing in the polling place, that's the extent of what you will see with your vote. Because then when your vote comes in on a memory card, it's commingled with the ballot box of other voters. But you can watch that process of vote. And then also the security aspect of our office, the tabulation room is a restricted room, restricted access to only certain members of my staff. And then the server is not connected to a network. So there's nothing that's coming in over a network onto that gem server. It's what we have worked on in there. And then we have had to recently have the vendor help to code the elections. And that is sent to us in a different format, and we take it into the room and load it. There's no network information exchanged. Does that help?
No, not really. Because I don't.
I can't do anything.
I know you can't. I don't
know.
trust a machine counting my vote. I just don't.
You don't get to choose which voting machine to purchase.
Well, when we were going through the selection process, a committee was formed. There were non-voting members, but there were voting members from different departments within the county. And then ultimately, that decision was made. The committee voted, and the Commissioners Court was the one that decided whether or not to go with the suggestion from the committee. So that was unanimous at that time. But also, when you look at the discussions, is the paper audit trail, is that still being kicked around? Is that, there's some new things being looked at for paper. And, there's a company that's got some information that's very interesting as far as having your paper and feeding it there, or it's electronic and you've got a paper receipt of it, but that's not here yet.
Well, there's 4 or 5 sections in the election code that deal with recounts, different circumstances for recount. So if you have a recount on an electronic machine, what do? Just hit the button again?
You have 2 options. One of the options is to do an electronic recount, which will automatically give you, exactly the same thing. Or you print the paper ballot images of all votes cast can be printed on one page. Every ballot is a one-page. Here's the information, the races that were on that ballot, and the selections made. So when we've had recounts, we print all of those and give those to the recount committee for them to count their races.
I don't understand what you're saying. If I'm voting on an EES machine, how do you recount that vote?
The memory cards are uploaded into GEMS, and we have the ability to go in and print all of the ballots that were from that memory card from a specific election, a location, or a race.
That's provided that the program is operating properly and doesn't have a hiccup.
Correct.
Right.
But we've gone through several recounts, and the outcome has not changed.
Okay.
We've got a couple things. We're already over time, but let me try to just get in a couple real quick ones. If I go out on the voter file, I can ask it a variety of questions, and it's nice and articulate answers. And it tells me that they may have 12 registered voters in one house. And I go look at that house, and it's a manufactured building, a metal building in a guy's side yard. What do I do now that I know that?
As far as registration, when you come to me with a concern, I can address, I can send information, letters, I can look for information, everything except something based on residence address. I can't go after that. Because
So
you don't.
I challenge that this house has 12 registered voters and their names are all over the place. You can't go after that because it's
No.
associated with an address.
Correct. For example, think of our military personnel that have chosen to have Collin County as their permanent home of record. They may or may not have lived in that location that they're choosing for residency for many years. But in order to be a Collin County registered voter, they have to have a Collin County residence, an address to provide to me so I can tell the precinct and the ballot stock creation for them for their ballot. And then they may be overseas indefinitely. They may be overseas a military assignment. They may be in the U.S. They may be in another state going to college. But the law is very specific. I can't pursue it based on residency alone. Find me something else, but residency alone I can't.
If they're all Spanish names and they all look like they work on US 75, what would be the most appropriate way to address that?
I would be confirming U.S. citizenship.
Can I confirm their citizenship?
You can, well, if you're looking at the voter file and you find their name in there, you can ask for confirmation on their application. Was that checked?
I can request that of you guys. There were 2 questions. Let's get to this one in the back. Sir?
Are all the voting machines within each county common across the state, or are they different brands, models, and so forth? If they are, how do we keep tabs on this software that's allegedly checked out by the federal government and the state government?
Right.
And keep track of all this?
The state is responsible for keeping track of the software that each of the 254 counties are using. There are 3 vendors, pre-voting systems that are in use in Texas. And so there's various blends. We have places where there's, during early voting, it's electronic, and we have to have at least one electronic machine in every location for use by those that are visually impaired. And you've got to have that telephone keypad and the headset. So that's one, at least in every location. Now, in early voting, most counties have all early voting or DREs, direct report electronic. And then election day, it's various things. It might be a paper ballot, and it's precinct counted, which means the voter fills out their ballot, and they go to a machine, and they feed it into the tabulator in the precinct. And then at the close of the polls, those precinct pieces are brought to a central location, or they're uploaded through phone lines and such. But there's various ways. Even if we have the same equipment, we might be utilizing things differently. In Collin County, we have all electronic voting, so that means we've got all DREs for early voting, all DREs for election day. And there are not a large number of counties that have that capability.
Ron, last question.
Chair, we go back real quick. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. I've learned a lot. But if you wade through Chuck's CSV file back there, you find, I'm having trouble with this, there are dozens of people registered to vote showing their address at a place that's an industrial site or a vacant lot. You can't investigate that?
That's a little different piece of the twist there. We do not register people to vote at a commercial, for example, commercial mailboxes. But if you have a vacant site, who's to say, when you go to the Secretary of State conferences, they will tell us that residency in Texas is a state of mind. And what that means, I have this vacant lot, and I sleep out under the stars under a tree, or I sleep at the corner of 380 and 75 on the southeast corner under the bridge. I mean, people have got to be able to tell me, where do you lay your head? So if they are claiming residency on a vacant lot, they can't claim residency anywhere else in Texas, or anywhere else, for voting purposes. Yeah, so that does get tricky. Now, we welcome your information and ideas on how to research. There are some things I can send out an investigation letter, and some things, we will tell you if there's something that we can't pursue, but the things we can pursue, we want to do that. We work every day to keep the rolls as clean as possible, and we, look to keep the, the files cleaned up, off of those of our friends and neighbors that have passed on. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time for that information to reach us. So if you know of that, we can begin the process for investigation prior to that coming to us from the, from the clerk's office.
That's the problem. Our address hold up. If I see a shack out there, a house with 600, 700, 800 square feet, obvious on the Google Maps when I go out there, and then I look and see massive quantity of registered voters in that house, and if I drive by it to verify that Google's pointing to the right house, it's still address related, and I'm stuck. So the question is, and what I'll do is I'll run a query, and I'll tell you every house in Collin County that has 10 or more voters, all right, registered. Some of which are highly respected citizens. Cindy and I called on a house when we were walking, I think it was in McKinney, and it was a guy that was running for election, and all of his sons and relatives were registered in his own house. He had a whole bunch of them. Anyway, that ends. Thank you very much, Sharon. We I can tell you that putting together the ballots for these elections is one seriously complicated process. Ladies and gentlemen, you know as well as I do, it's not what you say, it's what you do.